I'm delighted to have with me the author of Insatiable, and I'm talking about Scott Stone. Scott, welcome to Looking to Make a Difference with Gail. I love this.
It's great to be here today.
Oh, thank you. Now, you have such a diverse background, and I can't wait to talk about your memoir, but you have been involved in sales, and of course we know that you are an author. You do blogs. I understand you have a big interest in food.
Oh yes, I'm currently, it's not a blog yet, but three of my great passions, travel being the most obvious, but also also the arts and food is huge. So on my Facebook page, I am eating my way around the world. I'm going to attempt to eat in 100, and I've actually researched it. There are 100 countries that are represented by at least one restaurant in New York City.
Yeah, you were saying that, and I know you've been in New York for a good 28 years now, and you consider that your home, in having come originally from Michigan, but you also mentioned that you could travel around the world just in the city.
Absolutely.
So this is probably part of it. And I think that comes from your experience of your having traveled at such an early age and by yourself. Now, you called yourself a man of all seasons, and when we spoke by phone the other day, I was delighted to call you a Renaissance man.
Oh, thank you. It's a nice compliment.
Well, actually, it is the truth, because you are interested in the arts, a little bit about ballet, jazz, music. You're so involved in the food, people, sports.
True.
So you know a lot about everything. But do you think this came essentially from your parents? Because I know Mom, whom you refer to lovingly as Pete, also inculcated this penchant for learning about different cultures and education, which was definite. Or was it just something that happened within you?
It was a combination.
Combination.
I like to say the seed was planted early on by my mother. For instance, when we grew up, we were only allowed to watch 2 hours of television a week.
Okay.
And my mother would never say, you have to read this book. But there would be books laying around.
So that helped.
Theodore Dreiser or Thomas Wolfe.
Right.
And we just sort of pick it up. And then, you know, my mother, and I talk about it, I think, in chapter 2 of the book, about growing up. And my mother would, especially my mother, she was always talking about broadening one's horizons and filling up the vessel. And she would take me to the opera and classical music and museums. And at the time, I really didn't like it.
Yeah, how old were you at the time?
You know, 15, 16,
yeah,
17. You know, I was
Girls
typical
and
American. Girls, sports, you know, hockey, baseball, football, food, normal, nothing exotic food.
Right.
And that was my world. But then, and you know, you get into it right away in terms of my trip, which was only supposed to be 10 days.
Right. Now, the gift, as I understand it, was the QE2, London and Paris, and it was a 10-day trip, and something happened to you. But I want to use a quote from Mark Twain. I love this. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you don't do than by what you do. Throw off the bow line, sail away from that safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails. What does that mean to you and why?
What it means to me is you should move on your thought, your desire, and not think about it. Because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
True. That's so true.
Just, for instance, my father, who passed away, unfortunately, 14 years ago, was an avid golfer, and I was too. And for his 70th birthday, my mother and I were saying, why don't we take Dad to St. Andrews, with the great courses of Scotland? And I was very busy with, I'm from the magazine publishing world, and I didn't know if I could get away. Maybe we should wait a couple more years. And then we thought about it. You never know. You never know. To react, move now on such a thing. And, you know, unfortunately, my father passed away a year later, but we did have that great golf event.
But you did.
But what Twain is saying is, you know, don't hold back your desire.
Right. It would be terrible years later to say, why didn't I try?
And I feel strongly that those years out of university are such special years. And in the book, we could talk about how my father and mother both had two different views.
Yeah, your father was not as keen as your mom was in letting you go. But let's explain exactly what you did do. You had the 10-day trip, and when you were there, you didn't want to come home.
Right.
So you made a list of the positives and the negatives.
Sure.
Should I stay? Should I not stay? And you went back and forth. What was the one quality would you say that really encouraged you to make this trip? And the trip we're talking about is traveling to these 35 countries, less than $2 a day, taking at your savings of $914, going around in 2 years, 3 months before you came home,
Right.
and coming home with $11 in your pocket. How am I doing?
Right, very good. You got it all down.
And with wealth,
A wealth of
from the
experiences,
experience.
sure.
So your dad wasn't as keen on it.
Yeah, it was.
Yes?
I graduated from Michigan State. I was 22 years old. The year was 1976. Crossing on the QE2. 5 days in London. 5 days in Paris. A great
And
trip.
luxury.
A great trip.
This is luxury.
It was luxury. The hotels and staying weren't luxury, but where I came from in Michigan, southern Michigan, about 45 miles south of Detroit, upper middle class, extremely white, very Republican, pretty boring. My mother was the exception, very creative, very poetic. And after being exposed to the diversity, the color, the people in the streets of both Paris and London.
Right.
In fact, when I was in London, my last night in London,
Yeah.
4 in the morning, I walked the streets of London all night, and I ended up in Trafalgar Square. And you know, there are all the pigeons sleeping.
Right,
and
right.
There's a few people around. And there was this newsstand of magazines from around the world. And there was a map of Europe. And I swear, Gail, the map was winking at me, saying,
I
pick
believe
me
it.
up.
It called you.
Pick
It
me
called
up.
to you. It
So I
was
picked
calling.
it up and I thought,
Isn't that something?
you know, what's Scotland like?
Yeah.
What's Norway like? What's Greece like? I mean, to 5 days.
Isn't that incredible?
And then Paris was even more exhilarating.
Right.
And
Well, let's show a picture. As we're
Okay,
speaking,
great.
as we're speaking, we're going to show a picture of the QE2 because
Sure.
it starts that particular way,
Right.
and then the journey changes. Why? Because, Scott, you need money. You have to work in order to take care of your transportation, your place to stay, and for food. And I love the fact, let's take a look at this particular picture. Here I believe that you are in Sweden. Now, what was your job in Sweden?
Sweden, I was a professional leave raker. And
There you are.
I mean, you don't see my stroke in that picture. But can I talk about the interview?
You can talk about anything. This is
Okay,
your
so
time.
this chapter is on Sweden. And I got to say right up front, the reason I went to Sweden was for the Swedish women.
I knew that was
Because
coming.
when you meet guys traveling, and that's one of the great things about travel, the people you meet are fantastic. And when guys get together, you talk about the best youth hostels, you know, the best beaches, you know, what's the best beer in each
Right,
country.
right.
But sooner or later, you get around to women.
Of course.
And not that I did any Harris poll or anything, but that shows how different, how wide margin it was. They
Right,
kept saying
right.
the Swedish women. So
Right.
I thought, why don't I go to the
Why don't
source?
you go there? Absolutely.
So initially I was going to go to Stockholm, but I thought, you know what might be better
Right.
is go to a large university. And Uppsala University, it's over 500 years old. It's one of the largest
22-year-old
universities.
mind.
So I was there for 2 days. I couldn't find anything,
Right.
and I was getting really frustrated. And then I saw these people raking, and I thought, I can do that.
I could do that.
So I talked to a gentleman who was from Turkey. He introduced me to someone else who was a Finn, and he
Interesting.
he disappeared into this hut and came out, and he wrote on a piece of paper, "You have an interview tomorrow with Sven Andersson." Sven Andersson, sort of the Bob Smith
I think that would
of
be the
US.
name that I would have, yes,
And it's
I would
at
have thought.
9:12 tomorrow morning,
my.
not 9:15 or
No,
9
it had to be
or
9:12.
9:12. So during this interview, Gail, this guy is so anal hit, so clean, and he asked me about my background.
Right.
And I said, you know, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Michigan. He said, oh, a lot of Swedes there. And I said, well, not as many as Minnesota, but we have our
Right.
share. And I said, being the eldest in the family, my job was to rake the leaves.
Oh, weren't
And I
you
said,
clever?
and he's taking these notes.
I love it.
And I said, Mr. Anderson, can I show you my stroke? So I got up and did
And you did your stroke.
3 strokes. And you know what he said? Impressive. I mean, it's like he discovered some, you know, great young minor league pitcher. You know, everyone wants to know, how did I travel for so long
Right,
and so
right.
little money? And obviously transportation, food,
Lodging, right.
where you're going to sleep. Those are the 3 things. So I had to find a way to take care of each of those.
Of course.
Well, lodging and food was taken care of by farms. in every country, if it's France or
Right,
Germany
we have one
or
of you in Norway. We have that
I went
picture in
all
Norway.
over and I would knock on the door and try to say in the native language. And I'm not that good at languages, but I could sort of say I want to work on your farm for food and sleep.
Yeah.
But so often they still didn't understand me.
Right.
So let me get to Portugal. Anyway,
I love that.
So just backing up, so what the magic message is, I would actually stop a student, you know, in the respective country, and I said, "Can you write this in your in the you know, if it's, you know, Swedish or Norwegian?" And they would, and it was so successful. Usually 1 out of 3 farmhouses would take me in.
My goodness.
Okay, so the Portuguese one. I knock on the door, you know. No,
this is easy now. I've got this
I'm really
made.
feeling confident about it. So this woman answers, you know, very ruddy complexion, right out of Central Casting. And I try to speak Portuguese. You know, obviously, she doesn't understand me. Then I hand her the magic message. And she looks at it. and don't get me wrong, I've been refused before, but never like this. She screams immediately and shuts the door. And I'm thinking, my God, I mean,
what have I done?
What have I done? So the next day, I'm determined to find out what the story is. I mean, I was really shaken by this.
Of course.
And in fact, I didn't want to do any more farms after that. I actually slept in the field in my sleeping bag, and I went the next day to the local town. They had a little cafe, bookstore.
Right.
Ironically enough, there was a priest there, and I asked the father if he could translate. And he said,
"Oh no."
What the translation was. I am an American student. Where is your youngest daughter? I want to have a good time. And I should have picked up on the word. It was actually pervissimo. I should have picked up on that word.
Pervert.
So what you have to do is check twice. So.
But you see, that again, that's going along with it, learning. You know, you've learned so much about other countries. What would you say are 2 things you learned about yourself?
From this trip? This trip, I became much more, obviously, open with people, and much more patient. Okay,
patience.
And openness.
Okay, and openness. All right.
This is what I learned, I grew into even more.
Many young people were here. They have not left the country, and we tend to think that everything outside is the same as it is in this country. And it's such an eye-opening experience to realize that there are different mores, different values, different culture, and the respect. And I love the fact that you just said you became more patient and more open.
Right.
And that's what education is all about, isn't it?
It's so easy for many, or for anyone, to think, oh, it's not like it is in New York, or it's not like it is here. You have to open yourself up sort of like a thirsty sponge and accept.
Absolutely.
And
well, Pete, whom you refer to, your mom, you call Pete,
right.
When she came to Turkey, she traveled to Greece, and she traveled to Italy with you.
That's right.
Now, you mentioned that she became a traveler.
That's right.
Not just so much, but a traveler.
Instead of a tourist.
Instead of a tourist. And that's so important. And there was one time where she went to the ruins and she was horrified to hear people saying, can't they fix these ruins up? And where was that?
I think it was Delos in Greece.
It was in Greece.
Yeah, definitely.
And I remember going to Greece and crying as I walked among the ruins thinking, this is history. These are people here. And the Parthenon. And I wanted to get on my knees, and when I went into the monasteries, and then I was able to transcribe Latin into English, it was a moment of such grandeur and such spirituality.
Absolutely.
And I understand your mom. But I love that too, that your mom agreed to meet you. And I want to share this with my audience. At one point you're thinking, well, maybe I will come home at this time.
I was getting tired. I was starting to lose weight.
A little homesick. You went from 185 down to 127?
Yeah, 123 in Burma, right.
Because of the food and illness.
Yeah,
and
I love the food. I lost probably about 60 pounds in India in a matter of...
We're going to go into India and Burma in a second, because that's extraordinary. But you're thinking of coming home, and you're surprised because Mom says, no, you should stay. In fact, your parents were going to join you. Dad couldn't. He wasn't able to. He had 2 other siblings at home. But Mom joined you, and she did it as a traveler. God bless her.
She was fantastic.
I mean, when I went to Italy, it was shoes, and, you know,
and
all these beautiful places. But when Mom went, you actually brought her into hotels. There were rats. 1 bathroom that you would share down the hallway. You locked her in the room one night.
Yes.
I love it. And she was the best traveler.
She was fantastic.
That's amazing. It's amazing.
And it was funny because my mother, see, I was 23 when she came over, and my mom was 45, and my mom was very good looking. And I would, for instance, one of our places to hang out was called the Pudding Shop.
Right.
I don't know if you ever saw the movie Midnight Express.
But
that
did.
was
and
all
I went
filmed
to Turkey.
Yes.
So I was.
And this was, Istanbul was the crossroads for backpackers.
I love Turkey. Right.
And it was so interesting, some of these
but remember that when I went, it was a different time period than when you went. I went 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
So we have to keep all of this, all of the travels that you're doing and the amount of money.
Things are much different now in terms of where you can go, too.
Right.
But what I was saying is, I'd go to the men's room, and I'd come back, and there'd be 4 Turkish men hanging out on my mom. I'd like to introduce her to my 23-year-old son. And
17, I went into all these little places on my own, and you do grow up, and you do experience life. And I was reading children's book in Spanish so that I could learn the language much better, and I did.
And you went to Costa Rica, right?
I was an exchange student in Costa Rica and Nicaragua, and I told you I had dinner with samosa, and then got run out of the country because there was a problem. But what I started to say is, and like your mom, I would go into different places, and there was a place, and I thought it was Christmas lights, and it was a red light district.
Yeah,
so I went in, and as I came out of this little place, these guys are following me. I was thinking, I feel like the Pied Piper Hamlin, but I'm so young, not understanding, and someone had to say to them, stop that. But these are the things that you learn. You learn independence.
You just got to let it flow off.
You learned how to take care of yourself. All right, we have to talk about Burma, because there was somebody, and I'm not going to pronounce it correct, but I believe the name is Men, M-A-N, Men?
Man We Win.
Thank you.
Actually,
I
actually changed his name because Burma was so oppressive.
Yeah, this is somebody who made a difference in your life.
Yeah, first of all, when I went to Burma, Burma in 1978 was virtually a police state. And
how did you pronounce it? Myanmar?
Well, it's Myanmar
now. It's
Myanmar, but to me it'll still always be Burma.
Right.
And travelers were only allowed 7 days, and they wanted to know exactly where you were and where you went. And I was extremely weak. India really, I loved India. India was fascinating, but it really took a toll on me. In Burma, I arrived into Rangoon at 123 pounds.
And you're tall,
yeah, almost 6'2", and they would look at my passport and do a double, triple take. They couldn't believe it. So anyway, the gentleman you're talking about. So my itinerary was going to go from Rangoon to Mandalay. It's about, I think, 7 or 8 hours.
Yeah, we have a picture of you in Burma.
And fascinating train ride up there, meeting this gentleman who was an English teacher, and they were only allowed 2 books.
Look, I couldn't get over that.
And so he wrote down for me the books he wanted. I think one was, I think For Whom the Bell Tolls, The Great Gatsby, I think Theodore Dreiser, I think American Tragedy.
Right.
And I actually sent these to him, to someone else.
Right.
Okay, so I'm in Mandalay, and I'm just really feeling tired, really exhausted. It's hot, and the kids are following. Usually I love the kids and everything, but it really is starting to get on me.
You're not feeling yourself. It's
not
hot.
At all.
Also, another place to go to, money could be running out. You have all that stress.
So Mandalay, I decided, let me get out of the city. Let me go to a small village. And that's one thing I talk about being a traveler, to get a feel of the real people. Get out of the main town. I call it traveling blind. Get on a bus and travel, 7 or 8 miles, and then just get off. And I do that even today when I travel, and let it happen.
Love that.
Okay, so I'm walking, and I find myself in this cornfield, and it's so hot. And all of a sudden I start vomiting, and I just pass out.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know how long I was there, but this man picked me up, took me home to his little hut, and for 2 days he and his friend took care of me.
Unbelievable.
And also during that time, I was very worried because I was overstaying my stay.
I was just going to say, you have only 7 days. If you don't get back, what's going to happen?
Because they want to know exactly where you were.
Of course.
And so I kept saying, this is going to be trouble. I'm going to end up in jail.
You're so weak, right.
And so we went back to Mandalay a day late, and we had to go to the police. And that was a very, very tense time. And Initially, they said I was having to go to jail, and then they said, "Oh, no jail."
They wanted money from
they
you,
want
hundreds
money,
of dollars.
Which hundreds of dollars were totally wiped. I think I had $300 left at that time. And I was living, $1.50 a day.
And I'll
then.
tell you what really scared me too, and I read that. Sometimes because they're angry at your attitude, could have put drugs in your bag.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
And that you said that might have happened to somebody else.
During those times,
right,
I mean, there were...
We're talking about 1976.
1976, 77, and 78, and there were some travelers that traveled just for that reason.
And drugs were
for
rampant.
themselves,
Afghanistan,
drugs taking it across.
which you went to.
And with these border crossings, you really have to be, you have to act professional. You have to act nice. You can't give anyone.
No.
Because if they don't like you, there's an expression called, we're going to plant drugs on this path.
I hear it. I hear it.
A guy I met in Great Britain, he was in
swore
jail
it,
for,
right? And
I think in Bangkok for 4 or 5 years. He swears this day it never happened.
But
anyway, what happened, we were talking about those drugs, about that. So they make me empty everything in my backpack. And which is quite, it's all rolling, which wasn't much, by the way, because, I'm traveling very light.
Backpack.
It's a backpack. Books, and they take each book, Tropic of Cancer, garbage, throws all this
Yes, well, Tropic of Cancer.
Anyway, I look at all my stuff on the floor, Gail, and there's this little white thing the size of probably a golf ball. And I'm trying to think, what the heck is that?
Now you're worried.
Now I'm worried.
Now you're sweating.
What is that?
What could this be?
Did someone plant that on me? So he goes up, he picks up, I'm perspiring, and my heart's going crazy, and he opens it up, and it's this little wilted orange. And now I remember what it was. It was from the Hindu pilgrimage.
From India,
the Guru,
which is such an incredible story.
Which is an amazing experience, that pilgrimage.
And
it was a sacred piece of fruit.
Now, did they recognize it, or did Man have to tell them all about, what this meant?
Well, this was Hinduism. They are Buddhists, but
So
I
did they
explained.
understand
Well, there was an English speaker there.
Okay, look at all the complications
I've never,
here.
an ugly piece of fruit never looked so great to me, because now I knew what it was, and I explained to him.
How beautiful!
And my friend Min explained it, in Burmese to him, that there's some Hindu. Are we going to talk about this Hindu guy? He was amazing.
We're going to wrap it up with that, because
he was
we're
amazing.
going to wrap that up.
But this was a gift from him that I should always carry, always. I was very fearful if I ever lost the darn thing. So, and then how to get out there.
But I have to say, we don't want to tell too much, because I want everybody to read your book.
Yeah.
I do have to wrap it up, because with India, fascinating, and you say, like Kipling, this is the jewel in the crown, but you also mentioned the agony.
And the ecstasy.
And the ecstasy.
Oh, yeah.
And you mentioned 2 incidents, and I don't want to tell everything, because I want people to go to Amazon. I want them to get your book.
Yes, thank you.
Because I couldn't put this down. But in India, I felt like I was actually there going through it. You have one experience where you finally get to go to first class on this train, and it's a disaster, and there's some humor in it.
Now there's humor in it,
if you will. Some embarrassing moments. You also mentioned that you go to Thailand, and there you actually offered a daughter for dessert, and something that we wouldn't understand. But you explain it. You use humor. You use common sense. And in India, the last thing I do want you to mention, though, is that you go on this wonderful pilgrimage. You are suffering from a boil on your foot. You meet this fascinating man, and you end up speaking before so many different people.
Yeah, this.
Let's wrap it up with that.
People often say, what was your favorite country? Favorite to me. Favorite for what? But if you asked me, what was the most fascinating thing that you remember?
India.
It's India.
It's India.
With that said, India was also the most difficult, the most trying, the most agonizing, suffering country. But the color, the life in the streets, and the amazing, I actually coined a new word, amazingness stuff every day.
Right.
Now, the pilgrimage you're talking about,
it
was a 56-mile walk through the mountains. And this is from the god Ayyappan.
Can you imagine
And
this?
Shiva and Vishnu, who are 2 of the main 3 gods in India, they got together and had a child. This was Ayyappan. Ayyappan was a great hunter. This is the same walk that Ayyappan made 4,000 years ago.
History. It's history.
And my feet were so bad, I could hardly walk across the street, and I was really torn. I mean, I started trying to make it, and I couldn't make it. And then they told me that there's a shorter version for people who are too old or have trouble. It's 7 miles. Wow. And I did that walk. And during this time, because there are 3 million Indians, I'm the only non-Indian. And people want to know, how did you get all the way here?
You did stand out with your blonde
Yes,
hair
yes,
and
I'll
your
say.
blue eyes.
But the attention was just
Incredible,
unbelievable. It was just
incredible.
too much.
That's
But I
beautiful.
did the best to get it,
Right,
you know.
right.
And then one of the Hindu priests said, I want you to know that other Brahmin priests are talking, that they think that you are a reincarnation of Vishnu's 11th life.
Isn't that incredible?
Because Vishnu's 11th life, this is what I learned while I was there, has been questioned.
I'm going to cut you off here. I am not going to let you finish this because I want them to read the book. There's so much in here.
Thank you.
And it's not a question of running out of time. I really want them to
appreciate
find
you
out
holding that on, yeah.
what you're saying, what happens there, because I thought that was incredibly exciting, very
was.
moving.
Extremely.
Right,
It
right.
really was.
Just one last question for you. If you could pick the one place other than India, where would you go back and why?
Where I'd like to go back, but you probably can't go back right now.
Would be?
That was the good thing about when I traveled, because you could travel,
all
across.
over.
But probably Afghanistan.
I cannot get. Could I have you come back and we'll share more about that?
Absolutely,
Because
I
would
love that.
love to. This is just too fascinating. The book is called Insatiable. I know you can get it on Amazon. How can people contact you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
And also what I'd really like to do, because your show is about giving back.
Yeah, yeah.
What I'd really like to do is talk to schools, high schools, colleges.
I love
because
it.
this is a book for everyone, but I think especially for young people. Because that is such a special time in your life to be able to travel.
agree.
And I would love to speak about travel.
Well, I want to thank you for making a difference in the
Thank
lives
you very
of
much,
others.
Gail. It was
Thank
great.
you. Thank you.
Really, thank you very much.
Thank you.